Hi, my name is Jamie Findlay, and I want to welcome you to Acoustic Soloing. This session is designed to give you some insights into the acoustic guitar and also to help you and give you different ways of thinking about soloing and designing your solos so you get more out of your improvisation. The acoustic guitar doesn't have the distortion and the sustaining qualities that electric guitar does, so you'll notice that there's probably more you'll have to do in order to fill up the space. On a good acoustic guitar, though, you will have enough sustain so you can get away with whole notes and stuff. One of the things you might want to think about when you buy a set of strings for the acoustic guitar is the heavier the string, the more the top of the guitar is going to move. And also, most acoustic sets come with a wound G string. I usually change that and put an unwound G string on, just like an electric guitar, so you can bend the strings and you can, it feels more like electric guitar. So before we get started, let's get tuned up. Here's a high E. And here's a B. Here's a G. Here comes D. It's A. And low E. Okay, so many musicians think about music like a language, and language has certain rules of grammar and spelling and punctuation and pronunciation. If you make correspondence to music, music has the same rules that apply in terms of sounding good over certain chords and stuff. And if you know how to sound good over certain chords or where certain chords come from, it's easy to come up with the right notes to play over those chords, and that's basically what soloing is all about. In music, the most common scale is the major scale. It sounds like this. And when we harmonize that scale, or that is, stack the notes of the scale up on top of itself, we get the harmony or chords for that particular scale. You can refer to the booklet and see what I'm talking about. But the chords in the key of C are going to be C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G, A minor, B diminished, and C. So if I have a progression that goes over those chords or any of those chords in that scale, you can play the key of C over it and sound right, or at least sound like you're playing the right notes. So that's a little two-chord progression, both chords coming from the key of C. First one is a C major, and the second one is a D minor 7. And so since both of those two chords come from the key of C, where else should the scale come from but the key of C? So all I did was play So in most situations, what you're going to be doing is soloing over the chords. And if you understand where the chords come from, the harmony of the major scale or the minor scale, then you don't have any problem with coming up with the right notes. What I'd like to do is show you the 5 different major scale patterns and then suggest that you work on these and get them underneath your fingers. The first one I want to show you is pattern number 1. So that's the one with the open strings. Comes with this shape of a C chord. Pattern 2 is the one right above that. It's this shape of a C chord, the same shape as A. So I like to call it either pattern 2 or the A shape pattern. Then the next one is pattern 3, and I like to call it the G shape pattern. And then the next shape is pattern 4. I like to call this one the E shape pattern because it's like a bar chord, bar E chord. And the next shape is pattern 5. And I call that the D shape pattern because it looks like that D chord. What I've shown you is the 5 basic patterns of C major. And I've also shown you a chord that goes along with each of those patterns. When you practice the patterns, I want to recommend that you play the chord, then the pattern, and then end with the chord. And that gets your mind locked into thinking about playing those particular notes of the scale over that particular chord. What you're also going to need is you're going to need some exercises to get proficient at the scales. They vary in intervals, diatonic intervals, or scale sequences. I'm going to just show you a couple. And the more you can get underneath your fingers, the more fluid and good sounding your improvisations are going to be. This is a diatonic thirds sequence. What I do is I play a scale tone, and then I play a third above that. And a third is the distance between the notes. You always include the notes that you're starting with. So this is 1, 2, and 3. So that would be 1 and 3, and then 2, and then the third above that, which would be the 4th. And then the 3rd, and the 5th above that. And then the 4th and the 6th. So altogether it sounds like this. Here's a group of 4 sequence. What I do is I start on the tonic and go right up the scale, up 4 notes, and then back to the note above where I started. And then up 4 scale tones, back to the note above that, up 4 scale tones, and so on. And then I reverse. Back to the starting note. You want to get these patterns and these sequences and interval studies in all the different patterns so you have a lot to say. In vocabulary or in language, what the people that are interesting to listen to are people that have a big vocabulary or lots of ideas to talk about. In music, it's the same thing. If you've got a lot of ideas to express or a lot of different things underneath your fingers that you can play and sound interesting with, the more people will want to listen to you and the more fun you're going to have making these solos. Another thing that people use that come directly from the chords and the scales are arpeggios. And what an arpeggio is all the different notes in a chord. In a C chord you have the notes C, E, and G. Well, the arpeggios of that chord would be C, E, and G, and then C, E, and G, and then C, and then on up as far as you can go. So each scale pattern has arpeggios. There's a major arpeggio for pattern 2. Here's a minor arpeggio for pattern 2. And those arpeggios fit the chords exactly. In fact, you can get away with soloing without even any accompanying just by using arpeggios. Let me show you what I mean. Here's a progression of a 1 chord in C, then a 6 chord made dominant, an A7, and a D minor 7, and a G7. And I'll just use arpeggios with no accompaniment, and you'll hear the changes. So arpeggios are a really great device to use in soloing, along with scales. I want to show you guys some ideas about connecting your arpeggios and playing them and practicing them, coming up with some good devices for that. You should be able to get all of your arpeggios in all of your patterns. And when you harmonize the scale, you need 3 different triad arpeggios. That's a major triad, which is found on the 1 chord and the 4 chord and the 5 chord. A minor triad arpeggio, which would be found on the 2 chord, the 3 chord, and the 6 chord. And occasionally you might want a diminished triad, one of those weird sounding chords like that. And those would be the triad arpeggios that you want to get. You can also harmonize up beyond the 5th to the 7th degree, which will sound like this on the 1 chord. On the 2 chord, it'll sound like this. The 3 chord will be minor also. And the 4 chord's major. 5 chord is dominant. 6 chord's minor 7. 7 chord is a minor 7 flat 5. And C major again. C major 7. Okay, so when you harmonize, you get 3 different triads that you need to know about and 4 different 7th chord arpeggios. I find that the 7th chord arpeggios are a little easier to play, and so I want to focus on those. You need 4 7th chord arpeggios: major 7th, minor 7th, minor 7 flat 5, and dominant 7th. I want to show you a neat trick about these chords. If we just do all 4 of those in the key of C, we can get each of the chords or arpeggios by just lowering or raising a note. If I take a C major 7 and lower the 7th tone to I get a dominant 7th. And that arpeggio sounds like this. If I take the dominant 7th chord and lower the 3rd, I get a minor 7th arpeggio. If I take the minor 7th arpeggio and flatten the 5th, I get the minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio. If I take the minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio and flatten the tonic, I get a major 7th again. So you're never really more than 1 note away from any of those chords or arpeggios. When you're practicing your arpeggios, you can, once you learn all of the arpeggios, or say all the major 7th arpeggios in all 5 patterns, you can take and link them all up and maybe ascend 1 arpeggio in 1 pattern and then descend the next arpeggio in the next pattern. And then go up and then down and then up. And I always like to descend the same pattern that I started out with down here. Let's do that now in the key of G. How about one in minor we'll do minor 7 in the key of D minor. Okay, and of course you could do the minor 7s, you could do the triad arpeggios, major, minor, and diminished. And once you start getting these underneath your fingers, you're going to have a lot more vocabulary, stuff that you can play over the chords, and they're going to sound just like the chords. The only difference is you don't want them to sound stale like this. You want to develop some kind of rhythmic ideas like... and slide into some of the notes, bend some of the other ones, throw some blues licks in there, and you're going to have it in no time. That's the arpeggios to that progression I was playing a little earlier, and I want you to hear how it sounds a little more hip or a little more interesting now if I play the arpeggios rather than just a scale. The other things I wanted to show you on this video was taking some of these ideas and putting them in real-life situations in different styles. You'll find the acoustic guitar is found primarily in Brazilian, country, some pop music, and I also like to use it in funkier stuff too. I like to use the acoustic guitar in some places that really, you don't find it very often. I also play a lot of jazz music, and I primarily play only acoustic guitar. I've got some tracks I want to play for you now, and also some licks. So let's continue on with that. Here's country lick number 1. 2, a 1, 2, 3. It's a pentatonic scale with 6th at the end. Here's that one a little slower. One more time fast. Here's another one based on C pentatonic. It's got a lot of pull-offs and fourths. Here again. And here's that one half speed. 3, 4. And here it is up to tempo one more time. Here's another riff in C blues. Once more. Here's that one a little slower. Two, three, four. another riff utilizing sixths in a blues setting. Here's that one a little slower. Here's another one that utilizes this bend. It's very bluesy. Let's do that one a little more slowly. Here's one that utilizes the blues scale. Here's that same lick a little slower. This next one reminds me of B.B. King, and then it has a finish just kind of like Joe Pass. Let's take a look at that a little slower. This next one is similar to the B.B. King Joe Pass one. Let's check it out. And that one just a little bit slower. I'm going to play a little 12-bar blues for you now and show you some of the licks that we just went over, and of course some other ones. So check it out. I know I played a lot of blues licks in there. Let me just talk briefly about the blues scale. First, we start with the pentatonic scale. What the pentatonic scale is if you take the major scale and take out the 4th degree, that one, and the 7th degree, that one, you take away all the resolving tendencies of the scale. Okay? So now if you start that same thing on E flat, you have a C minor pentatonic or an E flat major pentatonic. That's the stuff relative minor, relative major that I'm sure you've heard about. If you take that minor pentatonic and add one more note to it, which is the flatted 5th or the sharped 4th, that's the blues scale. So now I want to show you some country ideas and incorporate them into a country song. The first one I want to do is in the key of G. When we're playing country, we're using primarily the major pentatonic. I talked briefly about major and minor pentatonic. This is the major pentatonic, or the 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6 of the major scale. Remember, the pentatonic is the major scale without the 4th and the 7th. So here's the first major country lick in the key of G. 2, 3, 4. One, 2, 3, 4. So here's that same thing a little bit slower. A 1, 2, 3. All right, this next lick is in the key of G again. It utilizes clusters and emulates the sound of a pedal steel. We're going to be playing a G6 type sound with a G, an E, and a D, and then move it up to an E minor, which is another G6 type sound, and then down a half step, and then up to the E minor again. Watch. You bend up on the E flat minor. That's going to be B flat, G flat, and E flat. And then slide into the E minor. Let's hear it in context. 1. One more time. 1. And this one's I'm going to play way up high here. Okay, that's the riff. Let's hear it in context. You can phrase that rhythmically different and it sound like you have more than one lick going, but really it's the same one. Here I'm going to play a little country riff, a country tune, and I'm going to utilize some of the licks I just showed you. I'm also going to utilize some of the blues ideas, the sixes and stuff like that. Okay, so here we go. Okay, we've changed guitars. I've put on my nylon string here, and I want to move ahead stylistically into a different area. I want to talk about Latin music a little bit, Brazilian music, and I want to introduce a new scale, the harmonic minor scale. First, let's make this reference to the major scale, the C major, and how if we start that scale on the 6th degree, or this 6th degree, we can have its relative minor scale. So C major and its relative minor, A minor. Now if we take that minor scale and instead of playing a natural 7th, which in this case would be a flatted 7th, or minor 7th I should say, what we're going to do is we're going to sharp that 7th and make it, in this case, a major 7th. Okay? Now, if the place where we want to use that is when a dominant chord, that's the 5 chord, goes and resolves to a minor chord, either down a 5th or up a 4th. So in this case, E7 wants to resolve to an A minor. So I'd only play it on the E7 chord, or the dominant chord that resolves. E7 resolves to the A minor. Now if we look at that E7 briefly, we'll see that it's got E, G sharp, B, and D. And that G sharp is the major 7th that we just traded in on our minor 7th in the A natural minor scale. Listen how good harmonic minor sounds over it. Okay? Let's go to the key of D minor now. And I'll show some arpeggios and some other licks just on the D minor 7 to the A minor, or A7 to D minor. So what I was basically doing there was playing on D minor, and then when it went to the A7, I'd play the D harmonic minor and stick that C sharp, the 3rd of the A7, into the scale. You can tell the difference just between the scales. Okay? So let me show you a couple of harmonic minor riffs. This is the first one. I'm just going to play them without any metronome or accompaniment. And they're all going over the A7 with a sharp 5 or some kind of flat 9 or something like that. Here it is a little faster. Okay, here's another one on A7 down here. Here it is a little faster. Okay. Also notice when it came to the A7, sometimes I played these 6s again. This time they're major 6s. And I'm just playing them in minor 3rds. They sound really melodic, and they have that Spanish quality that you hear on a lot of flamenco stuff. And I'm just moving them in minor thirds. You'll also notice that I played some of the blues licks from earlier and incorporated them in with my harmonic minor scales. Okay, so I'm going to continue now improvising over a Jobim influence type song, and this is Brazilian. You can find the changes along with the booklet. Here we go. All right, I want to move forward to the pop vein now. This is a chord progression that lends itself really well to more of a rock type feel, more of a pop type feel. The one I've selected is more hip-hoppy. The progression goes E major, and then an E7 with like a flat 5 in the bass, and then an A major 9, and then a D9, or a D13, it's a C sharp minor, or C sharp minor 9, to an F sharp 13, and then F sharp minor, G sharp minor, A major, to a B9 sus, and that's 2, 3, 4, 5 suspended in the key of E. Then it repeats again, does another little ending. You'll catch it. It's all in the booklet. Here we go. This brings to a close our session. I want to thank you for joining me, and want to just hit a couple of points before we close. That is to make sure you understand where each chord comes from. If it's a dominant seventh, you know, it's got to be one of the 5 chords. Have something to play over every chord that you have, some melodic idea. And you can play your chord and then that scale or the arpeggios. Be sure to practice linking up your ideas, starting on different directions and stuff like that. There's a couple of CDs that you can get of mine, and you can look for the 800 number at the end of this tape. And I'm going to play one more tune and get on out of here. Thanks again.